Hello and welcome to Radio Free Nintendo. It is December 19th, 2024, and if you remember, that's the same date as the last episode because we recorded these on the same day. We recorded the episode that was the John Lindemann trivia segment, and today we're recording today you're hearing the RetroActive on Professor Layton and the Curious Village, originally released for the Nintendo DS. I lost my notes. Hold on. Everything's going fine. Originally released in 2007, back on the DS. This is kind of a weird game because it was published by 2008 in North America and I think Europe as well. It was published by Level 5 in Japan, but I want to say in Nintendo publishes it worldwide. And I know for a fact Nintendo did the localization because I roll credits on this game today, and even in the HD version, NOA Treehouse is still referenced for their role in the localization. Level 5 wasn't... I think the second game was out by the time that Level 5... or that Nintendo published this game in North America, and Level 5 just wasn't pushing it. I mean, it's something very similar happened with Yokai Watch. Nintendo got involved and pushed that series, really, in North America. Despite the fact that it had been a huge fucking thing in Japan. I remember a segment that Dr. Metz ranted about the stupid blind bag yokai coins. If only he had known what was coming. But yeah, like Level 5 for whatever reason, and it may just be a size thing. Maybe they just weren't that big and they didn't really have the resources, but they didn't want to like give up control of it to, because they had previously worked with other publishers. Maybe they didn't want to give up control to those other publishers, so they just kind of didn't until the platform holder got involved. I don't know, but
there was also like some sort of effort to build a Level 5 America, right? North America.
There was,
and
point, Europe.
But
yeah,
but I don't know my timeline. It's just something I kind of vaguely remember, and I think that by the time maybe they had set that up, their star had waned already.
Yeah, it was after this, but it may have been something they were talking about, and that discouraged them from doing this on their own until Nintendo got involved. But the games did pretty well. It sold like 1 million copies in Japan, enough that they greenlit a sequel without involvement of the rest of the world, but then sold over 3 million units internationally. So that would be Europe, North America, Australia, etc., etc., etc. So this game was actually a pretty big hit for them, and it kicked off what ultimately turned into 6 games, a literal movie in theaters, a series of spin-offs, really. There were 2 distinct mobile spin-offs, the Layton Brothers Mystery Room, and I can't remember what the other one was called. And then the 3DS mobile game, Catriel, whatever, I'm boring and I'm the worst character in the series mystery. I think that's the actual name of the game. Which was then turned into an anime for no reason whatsoever. They adapted that absolutely nothing story of a plot into an anime, which is impressive. Not impressive like, wow, you did a good job. Like, you'd be impressed by something that's a terrible idea. And I would classify that as that. Catriel has been excised at this point, and we are getting a new Layton game. Like, so just about a month ago today, actually, they dropped a trailer for the New World of Steam that actually showed gameplay. That came out like November 22nd, 23rd, somewhere in that neighborhood. And not a lot of gameplay. Very, very small amount of gameplay. Not dissimilar to when we first saw the series on 3DS, Miracle Mask, at that 3DS reveal at E3, and it was like, there's one puzzle, and it's in Japanese, you figure it out. But, yeah, like, so that this is a key launching off point for giving Level 5 another hit. Because, they Yokai Watch was not there yet, was it? That came later. That was 3DS centric. So yeah, this is pre-Yokai Watch. So this is a big deal for them, and it made them a lot of money. It made Nintendo a lot of money too. So we picked it as an episode that we did back in November, where we sort of worked through like what would be a good game to represent the DS. We talked about different eras of the DS. We talked about different ways the DS was used. How some games, especially early on, tried to use all the features, and then later games basically tried to use none of the features. The 3DS
But this was in the sweet spot where games were starting to come out that were using the features, but that were also more fully fleshed than Yoshi's Touch and Go or stuff like that. Like this is, when
this is a game.
Yeah, and games like Trauma Center or other examples like Kirby's kind of a Curse, I feel like people feel was a kind of a turning point for the platform. And then, stuff like Layton also showed up and showed like here's how much fun you can have with like the touchscreen.
Touching is in fact good.
Indeed, yes.
Nintendo's marketing gave us the phrase. We just had to deploy it. So yeah, this was 2007 or 8, depending on what market you were in. So that would make it what? A couple years into the DS's lifespan at that point?
Yeah, even in Japan, it was in the early in 07. So solidly, 2 full years and change from the launch of the system. And then, basically a full year from then to when it came out in America, and the better part of a year until it came to Europe again, because... you've got all those extra languages to concern yourself with. And
interestingly, I guess because we're here talking about localization, I'll just throw it out. Not just the languages. There are a significant number of puzzles, especially in this game, that just get replaced. And I was curious about that, so I went and looked at the ones that have... there's a master puzzle list on a website. It's a Neo Seeker page about the game, where it lists all the puzzles, including the bonus puzzles, the weekly puzzles, all of them. And there's a little asterisk next to ones that have a European version of the puzzle. And I clicked into a few of them just today after I'd finished the game, curious why those got changed. And sometimes it doesn't. I mean, sometimes it's like it's a turn of phrase. Like the puzzle is based on a turn of phrase that maybe doesn't make sense outside of the confines of American English. There's a few of those. But sometimes it's something really stupid. And I'm going to give you an example. There's a puzzle where it's, you and your girlfriend drove to the theme park. You drove 180 miles. She drove the rest of the way. On the way back, following the exact same route, she drove 150 miles to start, and you drove the rest of the way. How many more miles did you drive than her? They replaced that puzzle in the European release, presumably because of the usage of miles. The thing is, it's an abstract concept. They could have just replaced the word miles with kilometers and the puzzle would have still worked.
Yeah,
There's nothing
exactly
intrinsic.
Yeah.
There's nothing intrinsic about it being miles. The distance is irrelevant.
Well, I just assumed that all these stories were actually true.
The answer is 30
and that they were just writing
30.
puzzles around them.
Then convert it. Yeah, like that's it's out that one's algebra. So there's a lot of algebra in this game. There's a lot of fucking algebra in this game. What can I tell you? There's not a lot of geometry though. If you're trying to do geometry in this game, you're barking up the wrong tree. But yeah, like there's I want to say it's like 15 or 20 puzzles out of the 120 that are replaced. It's a lot. It's kind of a shocking amount. Yeah, a lot of them are wordplay. And that might also have to do with the fact they were going to have to release this in non-English. Like maybe in the UK this puzzle would have been fine, but in France, get fucked. Or they just pull a Capcom and local. And only if you set your system language to French, Ace Attorney takes place in Paris. Which is one of the weirdest fucking things in the world. But, yeah. Like there is a lot of work went into localizing this beyond just putting in some extra U's. I want to say they did something with Luke's voice actor too, but the mobile version that I played is based on the US release.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's accurate. Now, again, I think did mention this previously, but again, because the fact that it was a big gap, I imported the North American release, so I didn't play the I did play the European release of Wayne Future, or Lost Future, as it was called here, but not for this one, because it was just, it would be quite some distance away. And in those days, importing DS games was as cheap or cheaper than buying them domestically anyway, with the way the exchange rate was and all that kind of thing. So I didn't get to experience the UK replacement Luke, but I was aware that it happened because I guess I'm sure this would have been kind of an early game that we talked about on the show. This was kind of early in our time. Myself and James and John, along with Dr. Johnny Metz, of course, as the host at that time. It was kind of early in our run on there, so and I had it, and I'm pretty sure James and Johnny both you both had it as well. So it was a game that we played kind of alongside one another. We could talk about it and stuff, and so I do remember that coming up, that they replaced Luke's voice, and it being like, I can kind of get it, because it's kind of
it's bad.
It's pretty dodgy. His voice, it's I guess you could probably argue about how dreadfully authentic any of it is, but
it's bad to hear Flora.
His in particular is I get it. I get how it happened.
Well, like I said, I thought that too, playing it, and I'm like, I don't remember his voice being this bad. I definitely think it got the actor who did Luke got better. This is the first time playing the character. I think she improves, and so she's less obnoxious, and the voice pops less. Because I feel like she was trying to do a range that her voice really couldn't quite carry, and as a consequence, it felt a little rough when she was talking sometimes. But then Flora talks in this game, and she's fucking terrible. I mean, we're sub-professional.
I mean, it's very minor amount of dialogue, I guess she has. And then I was like, Don Paolo has a little bit of dialogue. But then in the credits at the end, I think it only mentions who did Luke and Layton.
It sure does. Because I was looking it up. I wanted to see if it was the same person for Flora later in the series. And
so I was thinking, did they just, did maybe the voice actor for Layton do Don Paolo and the voice for Luke do Flora or something? There's just these are the only two people that did voices, and these are the two parts that they mostly did, so we'll just leave it at that.
This is who we cast them for, and then everything else was just a bonus. I don't know.
Just chipping in kind of thing. You get that, it's just sometimes you can, especially watch older episodes of things, sometimes you kind of much more quick to detect it's just that guy from later on doing a slightly different voice.
Or that bark is a person, and it's the main voice actor of the series. They needed a dog sound effect.
Frank Welker, famous for being Megatron and all that, also the go-to guy if you need a dog woofing.
Yep. So getting into it, we talked about, Greg just mentioned that we'd played it before. This is actually my first time playing this game since I played it the first time, which is going to surprise some people, because if you've been around the show long enough that these were still coming out with a regular cadence to them, I had a reputation for getting one of these and essentially annihilating them fully, completely, utterly, in egregiously small amounts of time. In a weekend, getting one of these and doing everything, every puzzle except for the ones that Nintendo had time locked behind, we release one puzzle a week. And just absolutely gutting these games. And so, the fact that I never went back and replayed any of them is kind of surprising to me as well. As I was playing this, I bought the mobile version of it because it's just more convenient for me than my DS. I was kind of struck by the fact I didn't remember many of the puzzles. There were some that I was like, oh, this fucker. I remember you.
And you get some that get iterated on multiple times, so you're kind of more likely to remember those where it's so
too many queens.
You get a few. You definitely get the thing that cracked me up about the Queens kind of thread of puzzles was they did this in Seventh Guest. which
They
we
sure
did
did.
last year
Yes.
for
Yeah.
the retroactive. It's like I'm sure we did talk about this when we were doing Seventh Guest in terms of like most of the quote unquote puzzles in that wouldn't get in Layton.
No, they're
not
bad.
logical enough, but that one it actually did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most of like the tile sliding and stuff like that, I thought like I got flashbacks of Seventh Guest too, so much that I thought like, oh, we made a mistake picking this game because like it's 2 games in a row that we're doing for retroactive that are just, like do these puzzles and check out this, goofy story that we put in between.
But to Greg's point, in Seventh Guest, like, a lot of the puzzles just aren't logical. They're just like, do you have the guide? Here's the answer.
Yeah,
Like the puzzle,
like the one in the kitchen with the cans.
Yes. Yeah,
I was like,
cans.
there's no hint here. Like, what am I doing?
I do think, and this is the first game in the series. One, trying to remember who the puzzle master's name is. Was that Hino? Was very good. Like, there are some very good puzzles in this game. There's some that are kind of shit. But I mean, there's like 340 in the game. Like, he gets to have some shit ones. Like, that's fine.
And also, of course, yeah, for the most part, it is a question of like, okay, a little bit like the kind of Mario 64 sort of principle of like, you don't really need to have done all of them to sort of see the end of the game.
No.
There's not that many that are like actually mandatory. Obviously, you kind of get like to the very end of the game, you get
There's
some
5 in a row that are mandatory at that point.
Yeah, so that kind of marks it out as being the end game. It's kind of different, but for the most part, it's kind of like, yeah, there's probably going to be some that don't land with a particular person because they just don't, they don't go in for that particular kind of puzzle, or maybe some are just outright weak, to anybody's got a way of thinking. But within the structure of the game, not necessarily a huge problem unless you just don't really kind of get along with the whole general logic puzzle concept at all. That's how I felt about it.
Yeah, there's a comment from Lemonade, who notes is he gives up on the game during the course of the retroactive. It just like does not enjoy it. But there's a line in here where it says something like, or was it? This is starting to remind me of Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. I think that will be enough for now. And he basically says, he has a word in here where he talks about math. Basically he is not a fan of what this game is doing in terms of, this is definitely not the game for me. I don't like these kinds of puzzles. I don't know why, but the process of trying to solve them is just not enjoyable for me. He said he'd look up a guide later. I have to make a picture of a dog that's been run over by a car. How would you ever work that out without a guide? I worked that out almost immediately.
The thing is, there are some of them though. It's funny because some of these things, they remind you, like when you travel a lot, like driving around, you see these. These reminded me of almost like some truck stop puzzles that you see.
Some of them, yeah.
Some of them,
yeah,
absolutely.
John talking about hanging out in truck stops doing puzzles. Yes,
absolutely. That's what I do.
Yeah, it's very much like John's experience with his retroactive is very much like the movie Over the Top. Instead of continually building up his arm wrestling muscles, he was building up the cerebral kind, doing his puzzle stops.
Is that guy one of these?
How did you know?
Lot lizards? Do we need to chase him out of here? No, he's a puzzle master. He's fine. It's different.
Yep. Don't worry about him. I just got one big puzzle arm. You know what I mean? It's just like
I was thinking more.
Puzzles.
I was thinking more. You're walking up to cabs asking drivers if they want to have a good time, and when they say yes, you hand them your math homework.
You hand them his 12 matchsticks.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably one of the most iconic Penny Arcade comics, where it's literally the start of the game. Layton and Luke show up, and they ask the guy to lower the bridge, and he goes, "Can't do it, boss. The bridge is down. Oh, I've got all these cogs. I don't know which one fits. Can you tell me which one fits?" And my immediate thought is, fuckface. You're standing next to the thing with the cogs. Why don't you just try them? There's only 3. 2 of them won't fit. This whole exchange we're having over the river is not conducive to anything. Now, we'll get to it when we get to the spoilers. There's a reason why everyone here is, to quote that Penny Arcade comic, asking you to do your fucking math homework.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, it's just basically any artifice can be explained away, which
Well,
is
yeah.
it's always a nice crutch to have built into your narrative. But you have to say they did build it in very deliberately and kind of properly. You know, it wasn't like something that feels like it gets parachuted in the third act. Like, especially, I didn't remember the game in exquisite detail, having, like you, not played it since 2008. But obviously, I did remember the big kind of resolution of the game and the implications of it. And so, you know, when you played it from the beginning, with that knowledge for the first time, you can appreciate just how baked in it is and all the ways it was telegraphed and, you know, kind of alluded to from the very beginning.
All these people...
but that explains the villagers. It doesn't explain Layton, though. You know, like, why does this guy afflicted with the inability to see a candle without it reminding him of a puzzle?
Twice.
You know, like...
He's reminded by that one candle 2 times of different puzzles. And why does Luke deal with this bullshit? Why doesn't he just go home?
Right. And, you know, like, occasionally the story will be, like, they'll talk to someone and, like, before I help you, you need to solve the puzzle for me. And Luke or Layton will be like, well, we don't have time. We've got, you know, a mission here. But then why are you constantly interrupting your own adventure, your own searches? Like, Luke, this reminds me of a puzzle, this candle. It's like, couldn't you have saved it for later, for like back home or something?
Yeah.
There's a really good one where Luke, they're in the sewers, and I'm not going to get into too much detail about where they're going, but they're pursuing someone. And they run into somebody literally just standing in the sewer with a puzzle for them. And I guess at this point, Layton's caught on to what's going on, because there is an implication that he's aware of what's happening much earlier than you are.
Yeah. That's a big, like, the thing that comes back in the subsequent games as well, isn't it? Of just like, okay, you know, Layton's clued in, and you know, Luke is allowed to twist in the wind and not know along with the player, but actually he knew, you know, pretty early on.
It's kind of the anti-Ace Attorney, where like the player is like, everyone knows why this is happening, but everyone in canon is too stupid to figure it out.
I mean, obviously, there's loads of parallels with Sherlock Holmes, but that again is a very Sherlock Holmes. Well, he basically knew instantly, but he had to have everything play out, and, you know, had to leave Watson in the dark for whatever reason. So
for a dangerous amount of time. But in that scene, like they're running, and you talk to the person, and he's like, "Well, I've got a puzzle for you," and Luke goes, "There's no time," and Layton goes, "Well, now, Luke, let's hear him out." And it's like,
I do love. I love how painfully nice Layton is, which is kind of very not so Sherlock Holmes, at least in some of the characterizations of it. Obviously, there's been a lot of different ones a lot of the time, but there was this one part where not that he wasn't nice, but he just said something, you know, that was a little bit dismissive, which coming from him is like absolutely savage. Like, there's the guy that just keeps making like food puns or meat puns.
Yes.
I've got like a veal deal for you or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And like, if you knew the stakes, you wouldn't have dismissed it or whatever.
I think Layton at one point just says, that's quite enough of that or something like that. It's like, good God, man, sheathe thy sword. You know, it's the nastiest thing he's ever said in his life.
So that is something though that I'm not sure. Like, I think that playing through it now, I'm noticing Layton being kind of more of a dickhead than I ever thought him being the first time I played these games.
Why do you think he wears that hat?
Right. Yes, of course.
true.
But also like figuratively a dickhead. There's this guy who's always, like screaming with the fist raised in the air,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Yes.
so
Puzzle
Layton
rage.
goes and like he tells you this puzzle, and then like you solve it, and then he's like, "Good God, I was just about to solve it," and like you asshole, and like literally like at some point he says like, "Have you considered the strong possibility that you're actually a jerk?" And yeah, like part of the joke here is that this guy was having trouble, and so Layton swoops in and solves it. But yeah, did this guy actually want this puzzle solved or not? Like at this point, playing through it now, I'm reading it as like, no, he's sincere. Like he's really pissed off that Layton is just like, yeah, like of course a puzzle, I'll solve it, and yeah, like the way that. Yeah, like that guy with the steak puns and the like. There's several instances of that where like I kind of wondered playing through it now, like, do the developers hate this character, or like, do they think he's kind of a buffoon? Like I kind of it's not something that I picked up on before, but
I read it more as there's only one person in this entire canon who's operating with the full set of cards. And that is like everyone, and it's particularly in this game, everyone else is
but they also seem to always kind of like, I don't know how to say this, not take him down a peg, but like the way that Luke responds to him sometimes, oh, if whatever you say, Professor, especially
Right.
when the professor is like, oh, like you have to be courteous with a lady. Like the joke here is that Luke is not all that interested in that, but also like you can just imagine him like rolling his eyes, like, yeah, if you say so, Professor.
I took it more as Luke's still a kid. Now we find out,
Sure.
and this didn't exist in the canon at the point. I doubt they had thought this far ahead. We find out later in later games that Luke's had actually a really, really privileged life and probably grew up more than a little bit spoiled. He's the son of a mayor. His family is well off. He's got lots of close friends. And then his life basically just falls apart overnight, and that's how he ends up with Layton. But he's a real shit kid in the prequel, the first prequel, because like I said, he's basically had everything he ever wanted at all times. And so Layton's like trying to teach him to be a gentleman. So his gentleman is always polite to a lady, and then that there is a certain amount of like Layton gets his comeuppance for that in multiple occasions, where he's stuck dealing with a woman he would really rather not deal with right now, but here she is. There's the grandma who keeps trying to get him to go have tea with her that he clearly does not want to deal with, but he has to because he has to set a good example.
Mm-hmm.
I took it more as just like he's overly hidebound by his protocols of what it is to be a gentleman, and that Luke is too enamored with him to be like, no, actually, I'm just going to do this because this is the right thing for us to be doing right now. But it's hard to say. It's hard to say because basically the whole game is Layton's get called in to look for. All right, to give some context, if you've never played one of these, it's an adventure game where the world is full of puzzles and the people are full of puzzles. Like they eat, sleep, and shit puzzles, and you poke the world.
Oh, like before I can help you, here's a puzzle.
Yeah.
Or oh well, thank you for helping me. Here's your reward, a puzzle.
Right, or
Yeah.
hey, could you help me with this puzzle? It's there's a lot of just these characters just are fucking exploding with puzzles. They're vibrating with puzzling intensity. And as you navigate the world to solve the mystery, there will be puzzles you encounter that are part of the story, and sometimes those puzzles are even themed to what's happening in the plot right now. That's pretty cool. But sometimes they're just like, here's a fucking random sliding block puzzle. Okay, Don Paolo just escaped on his flying machine, whatever. But other times, it's just Layton and or Luke talking to somebody to get information, finding an item on the ground like it's an adventure game, and then going to a different part of town to continue the story there. And whatever puzzles you find on the way, cool. But then there's like checkpoints at certain And there's more of them in later games. I think there's only like 2 in this one, where it's like, do you have 50 puzzles solved? Cool. Do you have 10 puzzles? I think it's like 10, 50, and 75. I'd blown past all those when I ran into them. But most of the game is just you walking from place to place, getting a little bit of story, and solving some puzzles on your way to the next place. And so there are like themes and stuff that get repeated, but from a gameplay standpoint, there's really not that much going on. Like it's all touchscreen controlled. You come to an area, you tap a button on the touchscreen that gives you the arrows you can go to. And if there's anybody on the screen, you can tap them to interact with them. And you can tap around the stage to find hint coins, which are used to help you solve puzzles, or more puzzles. There are more puzzles hidden in the level next to the thing to help you solve puzzles.
Look, Professor.
yeah.
A hidden puzzle.
There was a hidden puzzle in this window. It's like, look, why are you reaching into people's windows? What are you doing? You saw this puzzle. Like it's like Right to Rome, where you can just pick blackberries wherever you want in Scandinavian countries, but fuck you, puzzles. Just harvest them wherever you want. Doesn't matter. As long as it's not an offense, those puzzles, free range. I essentially, it's in a way kind of a visual novel because the adventure game stuff is so thin. You go to a place, you get some story. You go to another place, you get some story. You go to a third place, you pick up an item and get some story. And then somebody calls you and says they need you back at stage 1, and you go walk back there and you get some more story. There's not a lot of like puzzles in the environment. There are puzzles hidden in the environment, but the environment itself is not providing you with puzzles, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think that's the best way to describe the game. And then you get the plot that goes with it, which is there is a village. The village millionaire, which is a position, I guess, has passed away. His wife has called you to assist. Was called Layton to assist with a mystery in his will, where he mentions, is it his golden apple? Is the phrase he uses?
Yeah.
To find the golden apple he has hidden in this town that he is responsible for building. And whoever finds it gets his vast wealth. And so Layton and Luke were called there to help solve the golden apple because his wife wants to be the person to get this wealth. And in the interim, as they are poking around the town becomes a giant locked door mystery. And also somebody dies and murder is suspected. And so it's a bunch of like solving what happened in this murder, solving what's going on with the golden apple, trying to unwrap why this town feels so weird. Because as you're exploring it, it just feels very off. There's an internal legend in the town about an old man with a sack who shows up at night and kidnaps people who reported they were feeling tired and worn down, and then they return like 2 days later and they're feeling better than ever.
And they don't remember what happened.
Yeah, they have no memory of what happened. And so it's all about trying to unravel all these mysteries. There's a mystery of the family of the Baron, because you keep seeing pictures of him with a daughter, but the daughter is nowhere to be seen, assuming you don't have vision. If you have vision, she's everywhere to be seen, but I guess Layton just doesn't notice. Or he does, and he feels like he'll just keep
he won't let, again, I think we're meant to assume he won't let on. So, it's like, I don't know, Luke is kind of meant to be the audience POV character.
Yeah, I guess. But yeah, just bounce around town, this closed up town, trying to unravel why everybody acts weird about this giant weird looking tower in the middle of town. Why are everybody scared of this tower besides the obvious engineering reasons to be scared of this tower?
Yeah, no, it doesn't look that structurally sound, I gotta say.
No.
I mean, anytime there's an ominous tower, and especially, again, somebody like me who one of the first games they ever played was Castlevania. You see a tower like that in a game, you think it's coming down. There's no way that thing is going to be upright by the end of this. But the way in which it comes down is surprising. So, okay.
Yeah, it's very weird. Yep, and what's happening in the tower is also surprising. So essentially, you go through the town, or you find puzzles either from people in the town or hidden in the environment, or if you miss a puzzle that is no longer available in the Granny Riddleton shop, which is a house inside a building that has puzzles in it. Why is there a house? I don't know.
It's a shack, isn't it?
It's a shack. It is a shack. It is one of the many shacks in the game. And then you get to the puzzles, and there's basic variations on puzzle themes. There's ones that are logic puzzles where you get a description of an environment. I'll give an example. You'll get one where it's like, you've got 4 aces and a joker. This card is next. The ace of hearts is to the immediate left of the ace of clubs. So, and then you get some other facts about the cards. Like, this card's not next to these 2 cards. This card isn't next to these 2 cards. Figure out the position of every card. Like, which one?
Constraints, essentially, and just it's up to you to apply the constraints until you reach the early configuration that fulfills them all.
Right. Or like the final outcome of this piece of math is 3 3 3 3 3. Fill in an equation.
Oh yeah, this is late. This one, yeah.
Oh my god, that one took me like 5 minutes. I was like, this is taking forever. But I'm going to quote myself from the NWR Discord here. That these puzzles in this game, Lemonade was frustrated by it, and my thought was, it's probably, like, how much you enjoy this game is probably really a question of how your brain thinks, like how your brain consumes and synthesizes information. Personally, I shred most of these puzzles. Like, there's ones where I just look at it and I can't tell you the logic behind the answer, but I just instantly saw it and I'm like, it's 7. And like, obviously something in my brain ran, an equation ran, and it's like, yeah, it's 7. You did it. But it wasn't like super active. Like, I used about 10 hint coins to clear the game, and 3 of them were used on the same puzzle. So hint coins are things you find in there, and you get like a really vague hint to start, and then you get you give it a second coin, you get a more useful hint. And then by the 3rd coin, they're really just telling you how to start solving the puzzle. They're just like, all right, do these things. What do you see? Think about this.
Yeah, I guess it depends what kind of puzzle it is a bit. I mean, generally speaking, that's how they go. But certain ones, like there'd always be a certain amount of like user input. We've talked about the ones where it's like sliding things about in a confined space until you can get one piece of it out or something. Like the 3rd hint coin can't solve that for you the way that other puzzles, presumably, like the 3rd hint coin must just be like, look, when I stamp on your foot and say, hello, Mr. Thompson, this is the answer to the puzzle. Like, some of them must be, I'm going to assume, I am quite confident I must have used more this time than I did the first time. And my recollection of playing through it in 08 was like, let's really try and avoid it. Let's try and, figure everything out ourselves, unless it's just, you're really struggling. Whereas with this, it's like, I need to get through this. Yeah. I've only got so much time.
Yeah, I burned all my coins.
I very much doubt I'm as efficient as James at doing these in general. So there was definitely a little bit more of like, sometimes a puzzle, deliberately, I would imagine most cases, it's a little bit more, sort of cryptic about what it's even driving at. So I think I was a bit quicker this time to say, let's use the 1st hint coin to see what it's driving at, and then let's get on with it, because this has got to, we've got to make progress here. I've only got so much time to get there. And I managed to finish it, which, that was playing on my DSi that I got a few years back, which... I guess I would have played it on my DS Lite. I think I'd just recently got the DS Lite when I got it. Probably only would have been a matter of months, afterwards. So it's probably, one of the relatively early games I had on that. But still, I think the DSi screen is a fair bit better. Not XL.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's still a fair bit better in terms of brighter and, kind of, I think the colour reproduction is a little more reliable anyway. Although there was some variation among DS Lites in that regard. I seem to remember some had a more kind of like yellowy tint to the touchscreen or something for some reason. I forget. There were variances in manufacturing, presumably. But I thought it looked, on that smaller than the DSi XL, which had a bloody huge screen that was like twice as big. as the DS Lite screen, and that's smaller than that, but like a decent sized screen. I thought the graphics held up pretty well.
Yeah.
Like even though obviously, especially when it's got the video scenes, the cut scenes, like they look compressed to all shit, and you're losing some of what is probably some pretty nice animation underneath all that kind of artifacting and all that. But the actual game graphics on that native screen rather than like on a 3DS where it would have got scaled and kind of messed up and all that, they're really, really nice. And it's a triumph, I think, of like kind of aesthetic kind of knitting together all these different aspects in one aesthetic like really well, like just the kind of French Japanese like hybrid animation style, like so a lot of people I think reference with the triplets of Belleville or Belleville Rendezvous that was a few years earlier as being an inspiration, but obviously clearly there's still which was French, but then there's clearly a fair bit of Japanese inspiration in there as well. The music is very evocative of kind of some sort of sleepy European location, and then the concept and the characters all comes together into something that again, yes, is it brimming with artifice? It is. Is it sometimes the frequency with which they sort of say, oh, this reminds me of puzzle, or it's verging on like the porno film stereotype, of just like, well, what could this situation possibly lead to? A puzzle,
Yes.
It's like, but like I said, because of the way that they actually incorporate the concept of artifice into the narrative and all that, it's there, but it all works for me. It all works, and it's very much like a greater than the sum of its parts scenario as a result. You know what I mean? Like, again, I wouldn't say that I'm like super into these kinds of puzzles. It's not something I've got like a tremendous affinity for or I'm tremendously good at. But when you kind of weave it together with this package, there's enough like kind of, so you're almost like trading off. Like, I don't even know which one, sometimes with a game, it's kind of like, oh, are you playing an RPG, right? Are you playing the combat to get to the story, or are you kind of going through the story to build your character? Like, which of those do you really like? What's the bit that you're really getting something out of? In this is, I couldn't even say, what I mean? Which one is the meat and which is the bread or whatever? Like, they both kind of just trade off, and it works in. They've got the right kind of proportions there, the right measures of the different elements. And it all just kind of, you get enough of what you want when you need to keep going. And I felt like really importantly, and maybe this one more successfully than some other Layton games, the payoff just kind of made it feel like, you kind of had to be something like this. So it's not like completely like, oh, wow, that's crazy, I didn't see that coming. But it works. It feels like it emerges out of it and somewhat like kind of naturally, and it makes some kind of weird sense, and it all kind of just feels like, that it kind of took me on this kind of journey. This is somewhat immersion in this particular kind of, again, very artificial world, and it just worked.
Yeah, I think it just feels like a holistic package. Like, you're just going through it and you're like, okay, at some point, even though we made the joke about the matchsticks, like at some point you don't even really think about it. You're just kind of rolling through. I mean, I say that, but like we had Lemonade's quote where clearly they were thinking about it quite heavily. I'm a bit fascinated by the replacement puzzles. I've been looking at those lately. Like when they relocalized it for Europe and they replaced a puzzle about digital clocks with a puzzle about analog clocks. I don't understand why. That's very weird.
Well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe in Europe they don't really use the 12-hour clock, or Honestly, like I had trouble with a lot of the clock puzzles, or like with that puzzle anyway, with the 12-hour clock thing, because I don't know. I guess I don't go look at my microwave when it's past midnight. I guess I never. It makes sense, but I didn't think like, oh yeah, it's going to display 12 and not 00. And so that completely messed my count for how many times 3 digits are going to be the same one during it, over the course of a day.
I
I didn't enjoy that process at all, and it's one of the early ones.
it is
I was
very
just
early
like,
puzzle.
what am I doing wrong? And then eventually I figured it out. But
Yeah, I mean,
did
some
not
of the
enjoy it.
puzzles feel like that, like where it's, you could beat your head against it and figure it out, but is that really going to be fun? That's kind of what I kept
Well,
running into.
the thing that I like about them in general is the game very rarely wants you to do anything complicated.
Oh yeah, no, that is. I mean, that's something that again, I probably had that sense playing it the first time, but especially having played, even if it was a while ago now, another couple of these games, and the some of the logic puzzles, in Layton versus Right and stuff like. You come back to it now and you know that immediately, like
Right.
from having that experience. Now, obviously, if you were new to it, it might take you a while to get that sense, but I think you would get it, a certain percentage of the way in, of just like, no, even when sometimes you're quite almost intent. Well, yeah, definitely I can think of one puzzle. I think it was quite intentional where it's almost deliberately trying to mislead you into thinking that it wants you to do some sort of calculation.
Yes.
Mhm.
It's always more discreet than that.
Right.
And so therefore, that's the way that you need to look at it. Even if you do have, the kind of background to say, oh, well, I could put this into, a kind of algebra construction and solve it that way. That's not what they want you to do.
And usually, like, if you enter the wrong answer, or maybe like the first hint is going to be like, oh, you don't need to do math here, or nothing complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is some algebra. I will say, like what I said earlier. There is
or like it's kind of like, but it could be done like almost like tacitly, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
like you could still do it without. You could still do it without explicitly doing an algebraic construction.
Right. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
simple enough that can
but
happen.
there's basically never any geometry or trigonometry. Like there are puzzles that look like they want you to do trig and calculate an arc
Calculus,
length.
like if you're dealing with with it's got like some of the things about surface area.
Yeah.
With like things squared or all that.
But
Again, it's
they're
like,
not,
well,
they don't actually want you to do that.
no, again, it's going to be. Although there was one case where it was a little less precise as a result of that, because like I think it was the one where it's like you take a square and then you have a circle inside the square and then a square inside the circle, and then it's like how many proportionally how does it decrease? And I think they end up saying like it's 25%, but it's less than 25% because it's not 3/4, it's pi over 4.
Right.
So it's kind of they fudged that one a little bit to make it less complicated than it actually to make it simple. They make the answer simple.
To make it tidier than it actually is.
Exactly. Like for inputting it and stuff, because again, pi, you're talking about all the however many digits you want to take it to or whatever.
Yeah, that one's a little bit weird because they're actually doing the area of the squares inside the circles. There is a little bit of like trig or geometry knowledge about like circle inside a square is going to touch at its center point on each line. If you like, that's the biggest circle you can put inside the square, and then the biggest square you can put inside the circle is going to essentially have a radial length. And like there is like you have having like the drawing kind of gives it away. But you still have to know how to calculate area. And I fucked that up because I calculated volume like a fucking sick ass person. I was like, why did I calculate volume? I don't know. The answer is 1/4. I put 1/64, because it's like, fuck you, no, that's wrong. Or 1/16. It's like, no, that's wrong. You fucked this up real bad. You're stupid. And it's like, yeah, you're right, I am. I'm very stupid, but I don't know why I calculated volume.
You get the sort of, the little voice clips, don't you? Like, frankly, I'm ashamed.
So actually, GX has a very good comment about this.
It is. No, I think this is very salient, this comment.
Perhaps one of the strongest things they tapped into in this game is the puzzle assessment animation. The 3 clicks of the character is shown to be, as the character is shown to be right or wrong. It taps into the same drama I would get from Phoenix Wright, where the correct contradiction would cause the music to stop in scene. In this case, a puzzle I'm not sure about, but certainly gives a moment of quite a lot of drama. The slow reveal doesn't give you the immediate result, but does tease you slightly with the professor's cheeky smile just before the success fanfare. It's an understated but evocative animation that makes me feel like a genius when I nail the answer and an absolute idiot when I make an obvious mistake. Yeah, when I calculated area and I'm like, no, that's the right answer. Why is the professor look sad? And then I read the question again. I went, it's a 2D shape, you fucking ignoramus.
I definitely, like, a lot of the time, with the questions and the puzzles, it's so much of it can be bound up in the precise wording. That's a lot of it. Is, again, like, instead of like, is it some really complicated concept? It's like, have you read it? Every single word.
Have you read it?
Not just like kind of filled in a blank with your own mind, kind of.
That, and I think that's part of the reason I can just turf some of these games is I've gotten used specifically to how this puzzle master thought. Like, I can start to decode what the hints literally between the words of, like, what are they actually saying here? And it's
like, what puns are they going for?
What puns? Like, what are they trying to make me think they're asking? But what are they actually asking? Sometimes having both of those pieces of information is really helpful. They're trying to make me think about X. What they're actually talking about is Y. And that gets me much faster to the correct solution. I can just go like, cool, let me step around that landmine they've put here and just go straight to the end. But yeah, there's a lot of them where that wording is everything. Like, the graphic may actually make you think about the wrong thing.
Yeah, that could be, again, maybe deliberate or not necessarily entirely deliberate bit of misdirection or something. But yeah, it's just, a lot of it is that kind of, again, think about who this is aimed at, and, think about the fact that a lot of it is going to be just testing whether they don't have much of it, do they? They have the odd bit in the narrative where they kind of do that kind of school kind of test thing of like reading comprehension. Like, have you been following the plot? Kind of,
yes.
But they only do that a couple of times. Much more so is just like, have you actually read the puzzle description with complete precision?
Yeah, and that was always something I did really well in school. I was like, oh, these are easy. Just like, I never understood why people didn't get everything right. I'm like, the answer's in the text. Just read the text. Just look at if you don't know the answer, go back to the text.
You don't have to come up with anything yourself.
Right, it's there.
That's not what it is. It lacks any imagination. This was something I appreciate.
It's there in black text. Just go back and read it. But they're like the logic ones. Like, I appreciate those because a lot of them are actually really well constructed. It's not just like, if X then Y, if Y then Z. Like, the one I talked about with the cards, which is also super late. You have to actually think about these, like, the play space, because there's one where it tells you it's to the immediate right. Well, that means that, like, it's like hearts is to the immediate right of spades. Well, that tells you spades can't be in the right column, and it tells you hearts can't be in the left column.
Yeah, think about the kind of implications of it, and also, like I said, with a question like that, a puzzle like that, it's like, okay, we've got multiple different constraints that we're being told, have to apply, and so your process is naturally like, okay, well, let's start by fulfilling one of those, and then see if we can fulfill the others, right? But then it's like, well, which one do you start with? Like, what seems like the most kind of consequential? Or, and certainly with that particular puzzle, it was just, okay, well, this means we've got essentially like a pair. Now we've got one and the one to its immediate right that we could start with, and like there's only so many positions that they can occupy because they have to occupy them as a pair. So that's kind of narrowed the possibilities the most down first, and then we proceed to apply the other constraints. That kind of algorithmic kind of process. It's again, it's when you go about it in these puzzles. You could do all of that kind of implicitly. When you say it explicitly, it could sound more complicated than it actually is. When the way they kind of put it together and take you through it, it just kind of flows somewhat naturally.
And that one's really interesting to me because I actually approached it a different way, where the other things it gives you, it's the diamond, because it's 5 cards. It's the ace of hearts, spades, diamonds, clubs, and the joker card. And the other 3 constraints are the diamond and insert other card here are not next to insert third card. And then the next one is the diamond and another card is not next to a third card. And they're all the diamond. And that's actually the most critical piece of information. But what I did when I solved it was I basically just built a rubric in my head. And at that point, I realized I had a 3-card combo. And at that point, it would only fit in one slot. It's like it plugs in here. And I think it really and this gets back to what Lemonade was talking about. Like, this game just immediately is not for them. I'm a computer scientist. I write algorithms. It's what I do. And there is a certain amount of just this goes into the brain and the brain just processes it like it's any other algorithm that needs to get processed, and it pops out. Nah, both of them ate your fucking food. That's the thing. They're lying to you. They're
like that. Well, that's one that gets riffed on a few times. It's just like, okay, if we've got these various statements and X number of people are not being truthful, who must it be? Process of elimination. It's very, very explicitly a kind of algorithmic process, but
right.
Yeah, they get the mileage out of that.
There's a good one where they tell you the person who ate the food is definitely not telling the truth. But they're not necessarily the only person lying. And it's like, oh, cool. That's neat.
Yeah. And that one is just like, okay, well, just go one by one. Yeah. So if this person is lying,
that is totally
then
valid.
What does this mean? Yeah.
Yep. You brute force it that way, and there's only force, you'll get there. Or you can try to put a strict construction rubric around it and then just apply it and go, this person ate it. But it really is I just get these dopamine hits rolling through these things. Because
I gotta say, right from the onset, I realized that maybe I was in trouble when I failed the first puzzle where you need to circle which house that you came from. Basically, it's just a children's maze, and
yes.
I failed. One that you might find on a menu in a family restaurant.
Yeah,
and I failed
exactly.
it. And I just, I don't know, it was a bad start. I started playing it on the bus, and I don't know, I was like, oh, is this brain fog? Is this long COVID? Am I dying? I guess I am. I'm
Am
getting
I already
old.
dead?
Is this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been struggling a lot. The find out who's, who ate the sausage or whatever. I can find them pretty easily, but it's the mostly not the geometry ones, but some of the geometry ones, on this, here's a stack, here are these papers that are stacked, which at its most stackiest, I don't know.
The clear,
how many layers of
the clear film one.
Yeah, how many layers of paper are on top of each other.
So that's
oh my god, you're making me stare at my tiny DS Lite screen and just kind of counting, trying to make sense of what is, what's on top of what, and I'm just
That one came up in the Discord thread, and I just looked at it, and something in the back of my head said it's 7, but I couldn't tell you where the 7 was. It's 7, which I feel like must have been a long memory of that particular fucking puzzle. And it's just
maybe
like me from
I could
2008 screaming, "It's 7!" It's like cool.
I could kind of like intuit that like, okay, that's where the most
it was pretty obvious where it
paper was piled up. Yeah,
it's just
but then the actual counting,
yeah. I will say, playing it on the phone, it replicated and GX talks about it. It replicated the blocky writing style. How do you word it? On the topic of the HD version specifically, they made a strange choice of preserving the blocky line drawing of the original DS. You do get the benefit of having both sides of the screen to draw on, but I can't imagine trying to write any sort of note on your phone screen with your finger like that. I have the benefit of playing on a big tablet with a drawing stylus, so at some point it was just easier for me to use system-level screen drawing tool than the game's notes tool. I will say, I actually found anything I had to draw on this to be really difficult because my finger was in the way. So there's ones where it's like, find the star, and it's a bunch of lines. I knew where the star was, but I got it wrong twice because I couldn't draw the line perfect enough. And what happens is if you put your finger there and you wait, you get a little like magnifying glass above your finger so you can be really fine-toothed with your drawing. I just didn't draw the star good enough. When they did the port, if I was doing it, what I would have done is I would have just had you circle where the star was. I think that would have been smarter. Yeah, you could probably brute force it that way, but who gives a fuck? Like, it would have been so much easier to do. But I do think it speaks to why this game's never been ported to, like, Switch. There's so many things that, like, as I'm playing this game that I'd kind of forgotten about that would be a nightmare porting it to Switch. And so it makes sense, even if I don't like it, why these games are kind of stuck where they're stuck. But there's some drawing stuff on my phone that was not fun, decidedly unfun, in like a lot of weird ways. But overall, like playing on the phone was a perfectly fine experience, and you got to see the videos in HD. That compression, actually, GX comments on that. Also, another HD version note, it's neat to have an HD version of the game's animated cutscenes, but good lord, are they badly compressed. When playing on a large screen, the artifacting is very distracting. I'll tell you right now, I played on a cell phone, the artifacting was distracting.
That's interesting. Yeah, because again, obviously, like you can understand if it would be playing it in the original, the compression is always we're fitting the game card. Like the DS game cards, not necessarily that capacious, for video. And then, of course, whatever the compression would be to save data, then you've got the fact that it's getting down res because, the resolution of DS games was pretty damn low, wasn't it? Because it wasn't even until 3DS that he got up to like 240.
Yeah.
Which is like obviously not even, the standard definition was 480 in the US anyway. So, you're a long, long way away from even standard definition resolution. So between the compression and the down resing, it's no shock that, especially on a decent, what is in principle a decent enough looking screen on a DSi, it looks a little rough. But why it on the phone it couldn't have fared a little bit better? That's a bit more odd, isn't it?
But I would guess that's the version of the video files they had. It's probably
they didn't have the masters. Basically, they couldn't go back to the source. So a certain amount of, maybe not the full down resing, but a certain amount of compression was already just baked in.
Yeah, there are some cutscenes that look bad. It's like, boy, that looks like gross. Why does it look like that? And I've got a really high pixel density on my phone too, so it really stands out.
Sure, yeah.
I did do like 15 minutes today to try to wrap up, like on an elliptical at like a high intensity, and I will say my puzzle solving skills, Guillaume, to your point, diminished substantially when my heart rate was at like 160 beats per minute. My ability to intuit who ate the fucking meat would probably have fallen off the edge. But from a gameplay standpoint, I think we've kind of touched on it. Do we want to actually talk about about the inanities of this plot, the absolute bullshittery that's going on. Because like you can't, it's weird. All right, this is the spoiler time has happened now. So if you don't want to hear the rest of it, you could stop. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Like the idea that they just built a village to take care of this girl, just like find a relative, brother. What are you doing? But like there are people in the village whom have allegedly been working for the family for a while.
Yeah, but they could be just like the wife was originally, well, Lady Dahlia, right? She is essentially like sort of a separate individual, but that's only because originally she was meant to replace his dead wife.
Yes,
but it weirded out his child, so it's like no, like okay, rewrite her to just be a new lady, and that's it. So maybe with the other ones, it's like no, they can just replace the real versions who pass on or something. I don't know.
But does that mean everybody in the village fucking died? Like there's a certain part where it's like, well, these. I guess the answer is they're robots. Okay, so they're right out of the gate. Everyone,
automata. Yeah, I think of like the thing in Hugo.
Yeah. Because like they make an implication,
just that. Right.
They make an implication at one point that they have feelings and have like the equivalent of a human heart. And I mean, I guess the idea is that all their memories are fake, and Flora was young enough that it didn't matter. Because the idea is that he built the whole village to raise her in his absence because he received a fatal medical diagnosis, but her mother and her walked in the park together in the town that he built because of his fatal diagnosis. He didn't want to leave his daughter orphaned, which means she still had a mother at that point. So like, again, that part of the plot doesn't work super good. Just ignore it. Just remember,
it's a little bit muddled. Yeah.
The Baron had really, really good robots built to help raise his daughter, and also set up like the equivalent of an ARG game to figure out like what his greatest treasure is and find it and solve a bunch of fucking puzzles in order to prove that you should be the person to inherit his wealth and his daughter. And also,
yes, that's the just like, well, what proves that someone is a good guardian for a child, and it's just solving a bunch of these type of puzzles.
Hey.
I mean, I'm pretty sure, a high-functioning psychopath could fucking ace this test. He's going to be a shit parent.
Hey, Don Paulo, did you see Don Paulo solve a single goddamn puzzle? And he's a genius.
I said high-functioning psychopath. I don't think that's really, other than his flying machine or whatever, that's not really true with Don Paulo.
By the end of the series, he's proven that he is high-functioning, just not in useful ways.
It's true, but the reveal in the third game that Don Paulo has been impersonating, I haven't forgotten that. That's for
so
sure. Stupid.
I
do have the bit where it's just again with the tower. You're like, this thing's coming down, right? It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
How is it going to...
Sure.
Oh, well, Don Paulo's just got a giant machine, like, bulldozing aircraft that just, like, Bowser Jr. or something.
Yeah, it just swings giant wrecking balls.
And it's like, it might have the fortune in there, mate. Like, how is this accomplishing your goals? How is this productive at all? It's just bizarre.
Well, I do like... So, to cut to the chase, his golden apple is his daughter. Flora, who is living at the top of the tower, but is escaping periodically to just keep an eye on you. All of the automata are just there, one, to make her not feel lonely, but two, they're all throwing their math homework at you because it's part of the fucking test, to prove that you're good enough, and that's why you run into doors that are like, have you solved 75 puzzles? Oh, you have. You can come in. Like that's not like the game gatekeeping you as an artifice of it being a game. That is literally the mechanical creation of the game of like the Baron who put a door in front of the tower to just be like, if you ain't solved 75 puzzles, you ain't good enough to get in here. It's so weird. It's such like a weird plot conceit. But then remember, that's not what gets you the gold. The gold, which is immense, is did you make Flora laugh and notice that she has a laugh-based birthmark on her chest? Which requires...
Yeah, that bit, I forgot about that. I had, a lot of the resolution was in there, in the memory, mostly, as I knew what to expect. So it's like, oh yeah, remember this. But the idea that she has a birthmark that only becomes visible when she laughs, that was not in there. And to be fair, it's so bloody bizarre, it could easily have stuck in my memory, but it just didn't.
Yeah, I had the same thing. But again... That was to prove that you should get the gold, which means you already got Flora, the allegedly most valuable thing, before you get to the gold. It's because he wanted it to be that the person who gets my wealth should be someone who can make her smile. But you've already got her. So, like, wouldn't you just want her to have the wealth? Because... just to give her like a steady life.
The wealth is hers, surely. Like,
yeah.
But I guess it kind of. But they do sort of say a bit, is it? It's just like, well, she kind of, it is hers, but she just wants to leave it there because she wants the whole village to keep going.
Layton declares it's hers.
Yeah, but I mean that's the thing. But he shouldn't have to, should he?
No, that's why we have wills. The Baron could have just written up a fucking will.
The will is the inciting incident for the whole plot.
Yes,
so,
he wrote an insane will. That's the problem. He wrote a Don Paulo will. I'm going to decide who should take care of my fortune with robots. It's like, no, this isn't the Hall of fucking Presidents. What are you doing? Yeah, it's. First off, there's no way that will survives in court. There's no way. It's completely fucking nonsense. Like, could you imagine?
Unless the judge is an automaton that you've created.
Yeah, I mean, what court are we taking this to? Like, what nation state even presides over this?
Apparently, the London inspectors are coming to town to solve crimes here. So, and that's totally normal.
But it's not. But he's not real, is it? So that's Don Paolo.
But in the fucking cave, he sure is. So, like, again. The idea that's like, I guess, like, can you imagine the barrister going, look, let me. The will says you talk to the fucking robots, you solve the fucking puzzles, you go up the fucking tower, and then you make the girl laugh and you get the gold. It stands up in the court, and everyone would stare at them and go, are you insane? No, there's no way this stands up in court. Give the kid the fucking money. Give the kid the fucking money. And what grounds does Layton have to adopt a child? Well, robots said it was okay. Some robots were totally cool with it. What do you do for a living? It's complicated. Like, how would you provide for this child? Again, it's complicated. What's this other kid? Did you adopt him too? Not technically. Does he go to school? No. Like, this is you're not supposed to think about it. Just don't think about it. Just don't. But you like playing it again.
Whimsical.
Playing it again, like it's like, okay, I have to think about it. I have to think about the fact that Layton is effectively kidnapping this child. She's fine with it.
But still, for all the, and again, it's been so long, I can't remember all the details. But for all the kind of absurdity, and holes one can poke in this, it's just so much more satisfying than the gas. The second one, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like that is just like, yeah, obviously you could say, well, they're both absurd, or you can poke holes in both, but one works, one doesn't. Like
right, the gas in the wooden box that survives until you open the airtight wooden box. Yeah, no, that one is just stupid. And then the third,
there's definitely for however, again, brimming with artifice and silliness and all this kind of stuff. But there's a right and an effective and an ineffective kind of way that you can construct this, and I think it's on the right side of the line in this one.
I love that the entire murder mystery is because Don Paulo, a engineering genius, realized they're all robots. And so he just fucking offs one of these things so he could take it and dissect it. It's like, brother, you could just leave now. Like, fuck the gold. You've got everything you want. Like, this is like the...
But he's got this vendetta against Layton that Layton has no idea what it would actually be.
Well, at least as far as this game's concerned, they've never met.
No.
He's just read about him. Now, in the third game, it's made clear that they have met. Layton just has shit memory. But also Don Paulo doesn't reference that they've met before either. So, like, he's like, you're the only person who's good enough to be my rival. And it's like, or my arch nemesis, thinks the word he uses. And it's like, brother, you know him. Why are you talking about him as a hypothetical? You all were, like, going after the same woman. That's the plot of 3, by the way. Three is deeply psychotic, because three is the London of the future, which is like the gas. We could talk about the gas being just wouldn't work, and a town made of robots being stupid and completely the wrong way to find. Think about how many years it would have taken. So he had a fatal diagnosis long enough to build a fucking town of robots, but couldn't just find a good caregiver for her. Despite having Scrooge McDuck levels of gold bar wealth, he couldn't find a good caretaker. That seems like maybe,
yes,
maybe
man
you're
of conviction.
Maybe
a little
you're
bit negligent.
Yeah, maybe you're the problem, brother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But 3 really takes the idea of well, to be fair, amongst the things that happen in 3 is Layton turns a slot machine into a machine gun.
Oh yeah.
He turns his car into a plane. Again, Layton does not have engineering skills.
He MacGyver's a hang glider in this, though.
He does.
I'm guessing that's kind of like where that came from.
I guess. And you spend most of the game hanging out with adult Luke, or at least teenage Luke, while Flora makes googly eyes at him, and Luke's upset about it. In the London of the future, in steampunk future London. It's which really, like, the idea that they're in Steam Bison America in this new game. I don't believe you for a second.
Yeah, it's got to be bullshit for some reason. I mean, that is always, it's like, well, clearly this is bullshit. It's just how
right.
is it bullshit?
In the case of that one, it's so bullshit. It's the most deranged bullshit. And then it has a twist ending, which is just upsetting. It's just so upsetting. It's the most upsetting shit in that series. And there's a lot to get upset about in the Layton series. But like, this one feels like, I remember at the time thinking, this is such fucking bullshit. But now just being like, no, yeah, they're all robots. Of course they're all robots. Yeah, why wouldn't they all be robots? They're all robots. Because
I do. There was something about the idea of, like, it's an enclosed kind of community,
right?
And obviously you end up kind of like trapped there for a while and thinking, you know what, someone should adapt The Wicker Man as a Layton game.
They're all robots.
That would be an awesome adaptation. The only way to do it, and have it be like kind of, whimsical kind of characters. I mean, that film is very whimsical for the most part, right up until the end. But the last twist in that case, somewhat less.
So
somewhat less whimsical, good fun than the one in this.
So you make this joke, but I want to point out they've already made a Layton game that's The Village. I mean, very, very much it is The Village. Like, I get, I don't know. I'm torn between, like, because the 3 prequel Layton games that come out. That's the 4th DS game, Spectre's Flute, or whatever it's called in your region.
Yeah.
Miracle Mask, and Azran Legacy.
I only played Miracle Mask of those.
They're just straight up fucking magic. They're just like, yeah, there's this ancient civilization, and they had fucking magic. And at that point, they're not even trying to do the, like, excuse me, what? They're just like, no, they had magic. They could just do stuff. It's basically their version of Atlantis, but even more crazy futuristic power retro power. I don't know. But the Layton verse is right. I don't know. That might be more. This is some fucking bullshit. This is some fucking bullshit.
Oh
right
well, I mean, obviously, you've got the, you get that sort of, particular kind of, the Ace Attorney inflected kind of wackiness,
right?
Along with that latent kind of concept of like, okay, how could this sort of place like funk, what could be behind it? What could create this kind of scenario? What sort of absolutely massively sort of contrived scenario could we think of? But yeah, it's I mean, it's a bit like Curious Village, I guess. It's kind of like a further extrapolation of it,
right?
But with some very specific kind of mechanics involved as well.
Yeah, because it's got the whole story writer part where a person who writes in a book just makes fate happen. It's so weird. It's Curious Village, except they're actual people.
Yes, no, exactly. Again, but a little bit like that's where I think when I talked about Layton versus Right, I mentioned the film Dark City, which is again like it's sort of an artificial place, where you've got actual people like playing roles that aren't theirs. By naturally, but like by manipulated by an unseen kind of until later in the film force, that's making them play these roles for some reason. Like it's like, God, this is a lot like that, considering it's Layton versus Right. But that's the thing, though. You got to say with Ace Attorney, they did end up doing that crossover, but you got to think it did have a lot to do with this game, and this series even existing in the first place, right? I mean, in terms of, as we mentioned, it didn't come out until 2007,
right?
In Japan, even. And of course, with the original Ace Attorney game starting on GBA, before you had the form factor and the input mechanism of the DS lending itself to kind of adventure games, but then they get off GBA, they started coming out on DS, they start getting localized abroad and stuff. That surely must have been pretty pivotal for Level 5 in terms of, first of all, thinking about doing an adventure game on DS in Japan, but then also you had to have played a role with Nintendo, possibly thinking, hey, you know what, we could kind of intervene here. This is something that presumably, they'd seen in Japan. They liked how it kind of showcased the different features of the system. They liked the kind of demographic that it could appeal to, and that was something they were looking to sell more in that vein, having had significant success with things like Brain Training and Big Brain Academy.
Big Brain Academy,
yeah. Because Brain Age is the name for Brain Training in America, isn't it? Yeah, I forget which way around it is now.
Yeah,
I think
it's weird.
Yeah, I think it was Brain Training over here and in Japan, and it was Brain Age maybe in
right. Because
America.
I think you couldn't say it was Brain Training here because that wasn't proven or some shit.
But the point is, they were looking for more things that they could sell in that vein, and then they had this Level 5's game, in Japan, and it's like, okay, we can look at that, but also the fact that something like Ace Attorney had already kind of started blazing that I don't know that it happens the same way without it. The fact that and the funny thing about that, like I said, is that started as a GBA thing.
Right.
It wasn't like some entirely unique product of the DS and its different inputs and its appeal to different demographics.
With the idea also that you could make these serialized visual novels that tell a 3-part story, like we've talked about it. The first Ace Attorney game is meant to be a standalone game. Like, it is clearly not meant to have a sequel. The second game is clearly meant to have a sequel, and then the third game is like, okay, since we retroactively gave this a sequel, we now have to try to knit these two things together and make it a complete package. And like Layton follows that pattern. It made 3 stories. One of them, there's no indication that Mysterious Village was really meant to be a sequel, but they definitely left the door open.
Well, yeah, they do. Well, with with this version, at least the localized for North America version, it has a to be continued card with the kind of with the train right on it. But I was always assuming that was something that was added, that was in this version because. Since the Japanese version had come out, they had already kind of, if not literally already put it out, like the sequel was about to come out in Japan or something. So It was just like, I assumed it wouldn't have been in the original Japanese version, but that is just me. I have not checked that. That's a speculation.
Yeah. But yeah, maybe they had some early sketches in mind for what they wanted to do there and they threw it on there. But yeah, like that, the fact they even went 3 games and out and then new plot line. They prequeled it. Also, Luke is awfully like dumb. Like that's the other part about doing a prequel. It kind of makes characters' reactions in the original stuff not make a lot of sense. Luke's freaking out about the idea there's robots in Don Paulo and a flying machine. When you think about the fact that young Luke has seen the fucking apocalypse laser. Like there's a gun that creates the apocalypse and he's been involved in stopping it. Like he should be like, oh, this shit's boring. Like
water off a duck's back at that point.
Like I know little kids, they should be like, this is dumb. What are you worried about? This is silly. I'm not scared of that shit. All right, so to wrap it up, just to get everybody, because we didn't do this at the start. I finished the game. There's 9 chapters in the game. It took me about 9 hours to do everything. I've done all the puzzles. I think I finished it in about 8 with about 109 puzzles out of the 120. How far did the rest of y'all get? I know, Greg, you said you finished it.
I did, yeah.
I played for about like 6 hours something. I've got like 87, 88 puzzles done. I'm towards the end. I don't know which chapter, like 7, I think. And
they're kind of short towards the end as well. The chapters, aren't they?
Yeah.
You kind of, some of them you go in. A lot of it is kind of going in circles round the village, because you're trapped there and there's not that many screens, and they just kind of refresh it with like the chapter in night time and stuff. But different sort of paths open up eventually. But yeah, some of the chapters feel like they go on a bit, but those last few, it can be pretty. You don't necessarily solve that many puzzles or do that much stuff. It's just like the story things playing out more.
I want to
probably really quite close to the end.
Yeah,
but I've been playing it on the DS Lite, and it's been a good since this is ostensibly this RetroActive. It's because of the 20th anniversary of the DS. It's such a great handheld. Especially the DS Lite, like the perfect form factor, like just very compact. You can carry that in your pocket, no problem. And it's still fun to use. I just like to take out the stylus and scribble away or whatever. It's great.
I poked it on the XL, but yeah, the XL's big. I'd forgotten how big it was until I was holding it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to about level 5, I think, or chapter 5, I should say.
Okay.
I finished about 40 puzzles.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
So you need about 75 to beat the game, because then you get 5 more through. So you like you could just beeline straight to the end at this point.
Yeah, I figured I was about halfway through.
Yeah, you're a little bit past halfway. AG, who we've already featured today, although not in this episode, wrote a really long email for the RetroActive, but I did want to mention a part of it. Now, as I mentioned, I played Layton 1 late originally. But I was expecting some puzzles and some story. What I was not expecting, and apparently missed in the reviews, was a fully voiced animated cutscenes. I have burned into my memory of almost dropping the DS Lite when video started of Luke and Professor hurtling down a country lane having a conversation. Immediately my interest in the game changed. Other videos such as the Ferris wheel chase also stay in my mind about how dynamic they are. The accordion and music box heavy soundtrack I felt was perfect for the game because it was tonally apt for the environment the game was set in. Listening to the soundtrack after the fact, Layton 1 has the most stereotypical Layton soundtrack, while later games, 3 and 4 in particular, had better individual songs. And then he gives a bonus music request. Don Paulo and his latex perfection was one of my favorite running jokes in the original trilogy. And I don't think the game needed a Dick Dastardly figure, but his presence was missed in the prequel trilogy. I like the overall nonsense of the Layton series: robots, duplicates, underground cities, and real pure black, etc. I found the supernatural elements of the second trilogy less appealing, so I hope the World of Steam follows the former and not the latter. And he said, 2 minds of the puzzle segments. This reminds me of a puzzle, while in the game, this reminds me of a puzzle sections arrived from the very signposted characters and objects in later games made it feel very tenuous links that stood out more. Oh, I still play 1 through 5 on an annual basis and was chugging at the end. Too much Layton. Wow.
Well, yeah.
It's kind of interesting. It is interesting that one thing that earlier in AG's email there, obviously can't read it all, but the notion of how popular it was in the UK, apparently, that it was actually difficult to get hold of a copy of the game at some point. That they hadn't shipped enough, or because again I imported it many months earlier, so I was oblivious to all of this. But it all represents something that was a bit surprising to me. Again, I was once again oblivious to this because I didn't get my DS until Canvas Curse came out, and even then I imported it because it was cheaper and you could get like a different colour, the blue one or whatever, the original fat model. But just the fact that this was the beginning of, to some extent, I mean, I guess you could look at other things like Pokemon and stuff, but this was a key sort of time for Nintendo actually gaining popularity in the UK and Europe, like that because they didn't have the same. It's not that they didn't exist. There was there was a certain amount of presence for Nintendo, during the NES era. Otherwise, my family wouldn't have had one, And I think there was a kind of a bit of a surge late in the NES period when they did a bundle with the Turtles game, because the Turtles was just fucking massive, even though technically they weren't ninjas here. For reasons, but they didn't rule the market in the 8-bit era the same way they did other places, and that fed into then like the 16-bit era and stuff. So I assume they always did pretty well with the portables relatively, but still like this Wii and DS era was a big like step up in terms of like just like how visible the marketing was. And obviously some of this is very much the same in other regions, where it's like we're going to try and go more mainstream with who we're marketing to and how we're doing it and all this. And by the sound of what AG said, Layton was very much part of that, even though obviously it wasn't originally one of their own things. They pushed it, I think, even harder here by the sound of it, as being adjacent to the Touch Generations games of brain training and so on. So it's kind of, I don't know whether heartwarming's quite the right word, but there's something kind of it's sort of neat, I guess, about the fact that this kind of level of success and popularity was achieved with something quite unlikely. That they actually kind of went out on a limb a little bit, made a bit of a bet and had it pay off to the extent that it did, is just kind of there's something nice about that. And then of course to a fair degree, I can't all be blamed on this, but to a fair degree, the piracy, the R4 stuff at the back end of the DS just kind of killed that shit dead. And, the prospects for something like Ghost Trick later on were much, much dimmer. You had just in those few years from, 08 to 11, you had a much lesser chance of being able to kind of do something, a bit enterprising like that and find success, because the market had just soured so greatly in between.
Yeah, which is a shame, because a lot of really great games came out in that period for the DS that, like, some of them just didn't go to Europe because they would have required extensive localization. Not Bravely Default. The Atlas RPG, I'm blanking on it. Radiant Historia. That was all tied in. Like, the DS is souring market conditions. I'm sure the piracy was a concern. The extensive cost to localize that game's volumes of text. It didn't make sense for them at that point, which is a shame, because that game's really amazing. It did eventually come out in 3DS internationally, so that's good. But I did want to mention the music because it came up here. There is this series front to back has a style. It's inspired by. It's not strictly bal musette music, which is kind of a French style. We've talked about it. It's weird. The art style and the music style has a lot of French cues, but it's very, very extremely English.
Yeah, well, Layton is much more the kind of English gentleman, because we see it would have been more natural if he was Dr. Lautrec.
It would have been, yes.
Dr. Lautrec being the knockoff.
Which, for those of you who don't know, Layton, I believe, is a professor of archaeology. There was, I can't remember who put out Lautrec. Was it Ubisoft? It was
Konami.
It was Konami, that's right. Yeah, you're right, it was. They announced a game about a doctor of archaeology and a young girl that he has adopted going around solving mysteries via puzzles. And it was like, are you fucking kidding me? Could you do anything to make it even slightly less obvious? Would be awesome.
I mean, again, there's the fact that this was big enough to like have things like that, and also Rhythm Thief. Very blatantly owes a lot to Layton. Like, just the fact that it could have that kind of impact, it just says something about what it was able to achieve.
Oh yeah, but the music in the series is really, really good. There's a ton of good examples, and I just wanted to call it out. But I think we need to wrap up here. So on that front, does anybody have anything else they want to say?
No.
All right. Well, then, Greg.
Well, there's one last thing I will say is I don't know for sure whether I would have played this without the evangelizing of Chris Kohler. He was so on this, wasn't he?
He was.
This was when he was at Game Life, the Wired blog. Before, these are digital clips, of course, doing the Goldmaster series, all these, kind of interactive documentaries, essentially, like the Tetris one just came out. But back then, he was just doing the Game Life stuff. But he was so evangelizing of this game. I'm assuming it was a long time ago. He must have played it in its Japanese form.
Yes.
And basically been pushing the idea, wanting it to get localized, and so when it did, it was like, okay, I'm going to encourage everyone to play it. I wonder if he ever did it on this show, because he did appear on this show.
He did appear on the show a couple times, yeah.
Now and again. So, but yeah, that definitely helped kind of seal the deal, along with all the reviews and all that for me. Of just like, yeah, no, I should try this out, even if it's not the type of thing I'd played before.
Yeah. Cool. So, speaking of music, Greg, what music are we going to end
I think
with?
that it's difficult to escape the logic of the closing credits as
I can go with that
outro music.
I can vibe
and
with
in
that.
this case, I think definitely as we kind of already covered when we did the sort of song selection from the third game, you have the kind of live instrumentation variants.
Yes.
Available. And I think in the case of the closing credits, it really does benefit from that natural instrument sound, because of course it's very slow tempo, reflective,
Agreed.
Kind of somewhat bittersweet kind of thing. Any of those kinds of songs, I think it just puts a bigger strain on the quality of the instruments. And so, yeah, when you can enhance them, it just benefits a lot.
Perfect. All right. Well, on that, it's time for us to go. We will see y'all in the new year. Bye, everybody.
Later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.